Stop hurting our children and stop causing them to harm themselves. The message in a local lawsuit filed against the social media companies. Inside Story starts right now. Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, August 13th, 2023. I'm Matt O'Donnell, and thanks for joining us here on Inside Story. Bucks County is believed to be the first county government in the nation to file a lawsuit against the major social media companies. We're talking about Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram, Google, the owner of YouTube, plus Snapchat and TikTok. The primary complaint of the lawsuit is stated clearly. These social media products are deliberately engineered to exploit the frailties of children's developing brains and maximize their engagement using many of the same techniques found in slot machines. The lawsuit lists their tech tools, using algorithms or coding to identify what fuels engagement, employing endless scrolls in their feeds, and using what is known as IVRs, or Intermittent Variable Rewards, which create dopamine hits in the brain to alter behavior and create addiction. Leaders in Bucks County say they are seeing a mental health crisis among children, while their mental care infrastructure is not built to handle a problem of this size. And so they want social media companies to pay for more care and to simply knock it off. Joining us here on Inside Story, the Vice Chair of the Bucks County Board of Commissioners, Diane Ellis Marsiglia, who also has an extensive background in clinical social work. Commissioner, thanks for joining us here on Inside Story.
Thank you so much for having me and addressing this issue.
Yeah, pleased to have you here. We have the lawsuit. We've been through it. It was filed in federal court in Oakland, California, back in the spring. You've obtained representation with the California law firm Robbins, Geller, Rudman, and Dowd. Bucks County is a county of about 640,000 people, going up against companies with combined market caps of trillions of dollars. Some might say this is David and Goliath. Why bother?
Somebody has to start. Somebody has to speak up. I've said many times that in 1776, Bucks County stood up, and we're going to do it again here. You know, the most important thing government can do is protect their people, and the most important thing I think we can do is protect our children.
I'm sure you have a lot of parents behind you. Let's talk about your background first and what you're seeing. You're a clinical social worker. You've worked countless hours to improve mental health, address substance abuse, particularly in prisons. You served on the Neshaminy School Board. As someone with this expertise, what are you seeing and how do you draw the lines between mental health problems and social media?
So, you know, as a clinical social worker, we know that teenagers, they engage in what we call dynamic functional interaction. They get their identity by talking to each other, hanging out with each other, trying on new identities. That's what you do in adolescence. But those of us who are adults and didn't have social media, we did that during school and on weekends. Now, when it's available 24 hours a day, it is an overload. And that overload is something that the teenage brain, we now know, can't handle. And it's causing depression, anxiety, sleep problems. It's leading to body image problems where people are having anorexia. It's leading to suicide attempts. So it's important that we step up now.
You have mentioned during an earlier conversation we had that adults, people who are in their early 20s, aren't necessarily adults when it comes to brain development. In the lawsuit, it talks about how back in the past, the big problems were binge drinking, drunk driving, teen pregnancy, and smoking. And those problems, we've seemed to be able to attack them when it comes to teens. So why do you think social media is a much different challenge?
You know, this is such a new thing. I think we haven't caught up to it, and social media is growing so quickly that it's almost like you're constantly running after it. I think that we also didn't understand until around 2003, 2005 about brain development. It was not shown that the teenage brain doesn't actually complete growing until age 23 to 25. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more, but the idea is that because their brain development is not done, they don't have the ability to control impulsivity. They don't see the long-term consequences of some of their behaviors. So the social media pulls them in, and they don't have the skills, even within their own brains, to pull back.
Some may say it's tough enough being a teenager and you have that. Some of the companies have responded to this lawsuit. Meta says it continues to pour resources into ensuring its users are safe on Facebook and Instagram. It has more than 30 tools to support family and teens. Snap says it is constantly evaluating how it makes its platform safer. Google says it has strong protections and dedicated features. Why is this not good enough for Bucks County?
We give all kinds of limits based on age. We don't let people drink until they're 21, drive till they're 16. We keep kids on our parents' insurance until they're 26. So we need them to maybe cut back their hours, have a way for parents to be able to limit how much contact their children can have on social media. Ideally, it wouldn't be on at night. And they've got to control the volatility of what happens. The vitriol that we adults see on social media is upsetting. Imagine what it's doing to teenagers. And there are all kinds of techniques that they know they have to control that.
What would be the one thing that would work best in your mind when it comes to a change that is a verifiable change when it comes to social media usage and, let's say, people under the age of 15, 16?
Well, you can't order wine on the internet without proving your age. So there's got to be a way that they can do that with social media, that you can't get on, or you are limited as to what you can do with an authentication procedure.
Commissioner, you lost your daughter, Rebecca, to suicide in 2005.
I did.
She was just 15 years old. This happened, and you've pointed this out, this happened several years before social media platforms became ubiquitous. There is Rebecca right there, a beautiful young lady. How do you carry her memory in this regard, and what do you hope other parents will learn?
Well, one thing is that impulsivity I talked about. I mean, when she took her life, it was an impulsive action. So it's really important that we are aware that when teenagers are hurt, there can be an impulsive reaction. There are many cases out there of teenagers being teased and bullied on cyber media, and they have taken their lives. So it is my mission to make sure that we save as many lives as we can, but also to explain the fragility, as you said before, of the teenage brain and of the teenage life.
Asking that second and third and fourth question, how are you doing? Probably important, right?
Absolutely. And watching what those teenagers can get engaged in. Sometimes they can be moody anyway, but you got to find out a little bit underneath of that. Is there someone hurting them? Is someone saying something to them? Remembering that social media, when it's 24 hours a day, they don't get a break when they come home from school. If there is a problem, it continues all night long.
We could probably speak just as long here about the many benefits that social media has had. For one thing, being able to connect with people you love and that you do love to talk to. There's been glaring warnings every time there's an advancement in technology, whether it was the printing press, the telegram, the radio, the television, early internet. Why wouldn't social media be just one more hurdle we need to jump over?
I think it is a hurdle we need to jump over, but that's why we needed the lawsuit, because, we all talk about it. Parents talk about it. There's hearings in Washington, but something has to happen. And sometimes it's the court system that you have to go through. This is the same thing that went on with the opiates, the same thing with cigarettes, with PFAS. So sometimes this is the only option you have.
Keep us posted on the lawsuit.
I will.
Yes. Diane Ellis Marsiglia, Vice Chair of the Bucks County Board of Commissioners. Thanks for joining us on Inside
Thank
Story.
you. Thanks for having me.
We're going to continue this discussion with our panelists next. Like that, we have our panel back, so let's introduce them to you on this Sunday morning. Charmaine Matlock-Turner, CEO of Urban Affairs Coalition. Hi, Charmaine.
Matt, how are you?
Good. Jeff Gibelair, Vice President of Bellevue Communications Group.
Morning,
hey,
Matt.
Good morning. AJ Raju, Chairman Raju LLP. Good morning, AJ. And filmmaker Sam Katz.
Morning, Matt.
All right, so let's continue our discussion here about the Bucks County lawsuit. What I asked the commissioner off the top, given the size of these companies, their power, their influence, and also their money, why bother?
Well, I think at least some of the comments that I heard from her, as well as from others, is a lot of times it's important to try to bring these issues to the public's attention. And one of the ways to do that is through a lawsuit. And so that may be a part of what the action is about, is really to make sure that we're really sort of digging into what the impact of this is. I don't think that any of us really know all of this. Sam and I were talking earlier about we're glad that we weren't growing up, okay, with having to add this to the list of things that we had to challenge with. And I'm sure parents are really challenged as well. So how do you really deal with this and what the issues are? I first also want to give her my heartfelt condolences for the loss of her daughter. I just, that's a really, really tough thing to deal with. But yet to take that pain and try to figure out how do I really raise this issue so that all of us are talking about it and thinking about it, I think is critically important.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive to see how she has used that to, in her memory, really, to try and do good. Sam, what Charmaine just said, it's funny how a lot of us adults say, I'm glad I didn't have that when I was in high school, and yet here are some adults who are trying to do something about it.
I think the most impressive takeaway from watching the commissioner was the marriage of her personal story, this tragedy that happened in her family, her background in social work, and her commitment to public service. And my thought was, wow, it's amazing to see somebody in a position of authority and responsibility elected by her constituents, and then taking an action that is so far beyond anything anybody who elected her would have thought about. The litigation issue is the one, really the problem that you mentioned. The size and scope of the assets of the defendants in these cases gives them the sense that they can litigate forever. And so if there is a court system capable of wrapping its head around the technology and the complexity of social media to litigate this case, and I'm questioning that part of it, any more than I would believe Congress has the ability to create regulatory oversight of the internet. But the entire narrative of this woman's story and her leadership on this was really the thing that I thought was most impressive.
AJ, did you want to talk about the lawsuit itself and how it might be presented in court?
Water is good for you, but too much water creates water toxicity, and water torture exists as well. Social media has a lot of good as well. Imagine it flattens the curve, so a regular person has a platform that you otherwise wouldn't have. It also is a lot of positives. Chips are bad, alcohol's bad. It's really a mirror on society. How we use it matters more. How about some accountability as well? So I'm not sure I'm signing on.
You say that maybe it's just us looking at ourselves in the mirror of where we are dealing with each other and communicating in society?
I think it's a mirror in the sense that people who use the negative aspects of social media, I'm sensitive to the fact that she had a loss, but it's a ghettos of grievances for most people. That's what social media has become, but that doesn't mean that all of it is bad. It is also a useful tool.
Jeff,
right?
What do you think?
I think we have a mental health crisis in this country, and no one's going to disagree with that, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Forward Party, no labels, or whatever. No, and social media, I think it's easy to. I think it's one of the reasons among adolescent youth. And if you talk to anyone in public service or anyone in schools who administrative positions, they will say that social media is one of the biggest challenges that they face in terms of out of school. So what I'm hoping for is, while the lawsuit may not be successful, literally speaking, instead of saying, oh, here are more tools, parents, here are more tools, why can't they contribute to grassroots initiatives, let's say in Bucks County, to help, because the locals know what locals need. In other words, more mental health programming, more service, more centers for support, because it's hard enough to find counselors for schools. So why can't we're not going to get rid of social media, so we have to deal with its ramifications.
And the cost would be a drop in the bucket, or
to
not
them,
even.
But it's expensive for Bucks County taxpayers.
Sure.
I think Jeff articulated more properly than my attack, but my point is gyms can also, fitness centers can also create anxiety about comparisons, et cetera. That doesn't mean we have to ban fitness centers.
Sure.
It's how you deal with it and how you react to it. That's my only issue. But I do agree with the mental health crisis, how we're using it, not really the platform itself, is the users that are abusing
All the things
platform.
that you mentioned, though, have a point of sale. Alcohol,
100% agreed.
cigarettes.
Agreed.
This doesn't. This only requires that you have access to a piece of technology. And once you're outside of the realm of interaction between the seller and the buyer, I think that social media becomes almost ungovernable. And to me, that's the challenge of the lawsuit. It's the challenge of the congressional oversight. It's the challenge of parental oversight. How do you? Your kids are upstairs in their room. The door is closed. They're supposed to be
Charmaine,
asleep.
what do you think about this? So the commissioner did say, verification would be very important with age.
Right.
And also, let's throw in there just simple verification itself. If you're on a social media platform and you have an account, you should be verified as who you are and not, exist as some trolls just throwing
Right.
bombs.
I
all the
absolutely
time.
think that those things are there. We always know that first and foremost, there's prevention, right, which is education. Mental health is at, I believe, the core of this. If you take a look
Agreed.
at the Pew's study of the city of Philadelphia, I had a chance to attend their briefing, and mental health with Dr. O'Connor from the Mental Health Partnership talked about the fact that we are in a 5-year cycle right now because of the fact that we're dealt with the pandemic, that we've dealt with social media, that we're dealing with issues around racism and other really tough issues, politics, very divided politics. All of these things are weighing on us very heavily. And so we've got to do a lot to really recognize that mental health is a part of healthcare, and we've got a lot of work to do. So I was happy to see that what they were asking for were more tools to really make sure that we can intervene where we can educate where we can prevent, and ultimately make sure that we have things to really help.
The companies, and the response is, it varies, but it's basically the same thing as like, we're working on it.
Yeah.
There are tools in there already. You guys are good.
Yeah, but the kids know more than the parents. The kids
They know more
the
than
settings,
members of Congress,
so
that's for sure.
And they also know how to get around the settings and say, of course I'm 18. What do you mean I'm 13 or 14? So the one thing I think that maybe is hopeful is in filing the lawsuit, we won't go back. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue either.
Mm-hmm.
DA Matt Weintraub, Republican, joined with the commissioners, and you see it in Congress as well. Why can't we do something about this? Like, we have the power. It's like it's flabbergasting somewhat.
Section 230 comes up a lot. People at home may not know exactly what it is, but basically the platforms are not responsible for the content that other people put on, which is the exact opposite of how we here at 6ABC are run, because we have a license to broadcast. What we put on, we are responsible for. Some have said that if that is overturned or flipped over, the internet ceases to exist.
No, it doesn't.
And too many people would be liable.
No, I don't agree, but it would require that you make applications every year to the FCC, that you demonstrate the things that you're supposed to do.
Which is what we do.
Which is what you do, which is
Here
one
at
of the
the TV
reasons why you can't turn on 6ABC and see the things that you can see on YouTube. And so I would argue that this is media, and it is public media, and it is funded in the same way that your company is funded, which is through private investors in the stock market.
Yeah.
Well, and advertising, but the Disney company is a public company. Sure. So is Facebook, or Meta is a public company. The regulatory oversight is, of course, going to be impeded by the power of the lobbyist. And in Washington, people with money have multiple lobbyists and make multiple contributions. But to me, the social media world is the media world, which is a regulated industry.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about Section 230, AJ?
Well, I mean, I think that's a whole can of worms because it opens up everything. But I think I'm coming around to the notion of a general regulatory oversight. There is an addictive quality, just like potato chips, to social media, and it's intentionally designed to be that, cigarettes and alcohol. So my only thing is there should be some accountability to ourselves on how we use things, and we can't just blame everybody for all of our problems. That's all.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
A mix of both. I mean, you can have common sense regulation, but it can't just eliminate platforms just because we don't know how to use it. We can't just eliminate alcohol just because somebody abuses it. There has to be a balance between the two.
I agree. And then I think of what happened in Bucks County a year or so ago before the lawsuit was filed. TikTok has the Devious Licks Challenge. I mean, how does TikTok not see this and pale it back? Kids got hurt, school property got destroyed. And it's trending, if you will. If we showed it, you would see it like at top of the screen.
Right, or people showing up in New York in Times Square or
right,
something.
Right, looking for a
giving
gaming
away
device.
Free computers or something. Those things are going on, but at the same time, my grandson is now hooked on fishing.
Right.
It's not a bad
No,
thing.
no
Okay?
pun intended.
Like actual fishing.
I mean, actual fishing. He actually is right now
How old's your
fishing at his
grandson?
camp, 11 years old. And
Good for
so
him.
he
Yes,
brings his
camp
computer
is great.
downstairs this morning, and he's watching someone fish. So
And there's a fisherman in Sri Lanka right now that is out on the coast, and he has immediate market information
No,
that
it's
he did not
wonderful.
have, mainly because
You're
social
right.
media you connect.
And that's good.
I can
That's
see my
exactly.
I can see people from India FaceTime with each other. Those are the great things about technology.
That's right.
Arab Spring would not have happened if it wasn't social media.
right.
Social
Right.
justice would not be spreading
Exactly.
so fast if it wasn't social
Exactly.
media.
There's no question about
Alcohol, there's a lot of celebration when happened without alcohol, but also lots of bad things happen because
Right.
of alcohol too.
Right. But I think what we're saying is, which is why I think this is not a DNR issue, is because we know that there's good there and we know that there are challenges there. And the question is, how do you make sure you can maintain the
I agree with
good,
that. No, I agree with
but not ignore the fact that there are really some deep, dark things that happen when people spiral into issues that ultimately they are unable to actually deal with. So whether it's bullying at school, and as you said before, maybe you could go home and feel safe. Now bullying online
everywhere.
can be 24/7, and depending on where you are mentally, as well as what your support network looks like, that can be pretty devastating.
I've been watching the evolution of Trey Turner, the Phillies shortstop, and how
And you brought that up.
Switch.
Philadelphia really, I mean, I love the city. I've lived here most of my life, but it's really impressed me with how they handled him. They used positivity, and it clearly worked. He immediately turned around when they started giving him ovations. And so, trying to form the analogy here, I wonder if there's a way we as a society don't need our elders to do something for us. We just morally object when our friends or relatives or whoever post something that's bad or obscene or whatever, and maybe we can work through it that way.
It is probably the greatest strength of social media is the democratization of information and opinion.
That's right.
So this movement to support Trey Turner starts on talk radio, and then it balloons into social media, and then it infuses 45,000 people at a baseball game to do something I've never seen. I mean, let me just say this, that in 73 years of being a Phillies fan, I've never seen us support a guy who was doing what he was doing. Followed by a no-hitter, I would add.
That helped.
Followed by, I think, the beginnings of a World Series surge.
They aren't playing the Royals and the
But
Nationals.
to Sam, to your point, it's not just democratization of information, but also decentralization of authority. So it flattens
Bottom
the
up.
power, and it's a bottom-up revolution. So
And this is a perfect example.
But it
of
can
Trey
also,
Turner.
but it can also backfire, right? So everybody now thinks they're Walter Cronkite, and everybody now just because they have it from.
I mean,
the
I don't
basement-
even think I am.
But from the
Or they think
basement.
they're mad now.
Everybody's a journalist, or so they say.
Right.
Could Philadelphia become known as the most positive city in the country
Could it be?
out of this?
Wait,
I'm still on the
Who
Trey
we
Turner.
polling?
train.
Amongst ourselves, absolutely.
Matt.
If we only poll Philadelphians.
Matt, if there was ever a case for a city that should be positive, it would be us. This is the only city where the old and the new coexist in such
Right.
great fashion. You have the City Hall, one of the most iconic buildings, right next to facing Comcast Tower. We have great riches. That's
Just for
something
your
to be proud of.
information, in 1922, there was a movement to tear City Hall down.
There was.
Philadelphia, so.
That's such a Philadelphia thing. We'll be right back with Inside Story. Made in America not happening. Everyone wants to know why, Charmaine.
Yeah, well, I think we've heard some of the stories. Maybe it's ticket sales. Maybe, it's what's going on with Lizzo. They had a story, again, on social media that she lost, I think, about 224,000.
On social media.
224,000 friends, likes, or something, however you
Instagram,
sort of measure these kinds of things. And so I think there's a sense that, that whole issue around what she's dealing with right now and the people who are accusing her of some really bad things had something ultimately to do with it. But the part that really just sort of got to me was just sort of looking at the numbers. 50,000 people a day over two, that means 100,000 folks were going to be at that concert, over a 2-day period. Thousands of people working.
Yeah, it's a loss.
It's a loss.
Yep.
This is a curse.
That's Inside Story for this week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for our panelists. Thanks for our guest, the commissioner, and we'll be back next week. I'll see you Monday morning.